I found my daughter on the bathroom floor of a gas station outside of Tulsa, barely conscious. Her lip was split open, her dress torn at the shoulder, and she was shaking so hard I thought she was having a seizure. When I knelt beside her, she grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Mom, she told me I was nothing, that my people were trash." And then she left me here to disappear. I drove her home that night, and at 2 in the morning, I picked up my phone and texted my younger brother, "Hector, it's time. Remember what Abuela taught us? We're going to need every bit of it. This is a story based on real events. Hello, my dears. Set aside whatever you're doing for a little while. I want to share something with you that might change the way you look at your own family. Write in the comments where you're watching from tonight. We wish you a pleasant listen." September in eastern Oklahoma can fool you. The days still burn hot, but by evening the air turns cool and the cicadas go quiet all at once like somebody flipped a switch. I was driving home from the community center where I volunteer every Tuesday and Thursday, teaching English to immigrant families. My name is Dolores Medina. I am 63 years old, a retired school counselor, a widow, and a grandmother of 2. Most folks around Broken Arrow know me because I spent 31 years in the public school system. I buried my husband Ray 8 years ago, heart attack in his sleep, and since then I have lived alone in the little brick house he built with his own hands when we were young and foolish and believed love could fix anything. My phone rang while I was pulling into the driveway. The number was blocked. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my chest tightened the way it does when trouble is nearby. A mother's instinct never retires. "Mrs. Medina?" A young woman's voice. Shaky. "This is Kayla. I work at the Quick Stop on Route 66, the one past the creek. Your daughter is here. She's hurt real bad. She keeps saying your name." I didn't remember starting the engine again. I didn't remember backing out of the driveway or running the stop sign on Elm Street. All I remember is gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white and praying out loud to a God I wasn't sure was listening. My daughter, Isabella, 34 years old, smart as a whip, stubborn as her father. She married a man named Colton Burwell 4 years ago. The Burwells own half the cattle ranches in northeastern Oklahoma and a good chunk of the commercial real estate in Tulsa. Money, power, and a last name that opens every door in the state. When Isabella told me she was marrying Colton, I smiled and hugged her and kept my mouth shut. But I saw how his mother, Judith Burwell, looked at me at the engagement dinner, like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. She never said it to my face, not then, but I could read it in the way she turned her head when I spoke, the way she introduced me to her friends as Colton's mother-in-law without ever using my name. The Quick Stop appeared around the bend, a sad little building with flickering fluorescent lights. I parked crooked and ran inside. The cashier, a girl barely 20 with pink streaks in her hair, pointed to the restroom in the back. I wanted to call 911, but she begged me not to, said they'd find her. I pushed open the bathroom door and the smell hit me first, blood and fear. Isabella was on the tile floor, curled up against the wall, holding her stomach. Her left eye was swollen shut. There were bruises on her arms shaped like fingers. Someone had grabbed her and squeezed. Her blouse was ripped and I could see more bruises across her ribs. "Baby." I dropped to my knees. "I'm here. I'm right here." She opened her good eye and looked at me, and what I saw in it broke something inside my chest. Not just pain, defeat. My daughter, who once stood up to a school board and won, who put herself through college on scholarships and waitressing, who never backed down from anything in her life, looked at me like a person who had given up. "She did this," Isabella whispered. "Judith, your mother-in-law?" She nodded, and the movement made her wince. "She found out, Mom, about the money, about what she's been doing, and she told me that no half-Mexican woman was going to ruin what she built." I felt something ignite in my belly that I hadn't felt since the night a parent showed up drunk to a school conference and threatened one of my students. A slow, deep rage that didn't cloud my thinking but sharpened it. I looked at my daughter's battered face, and I made a decision right there on that dirty bathroom floor. We were not going to the hospital. We were not calling the police. Not yet. Not until I understood exactly what we were dealing with. "Can you walk?" I asked. "I think so." I helped her up, let her lean on me, and half carried her to the car. The cashier watched us from behind the counter with wide, frightened eyes. "Thank you, Kayla," I said. "If anyone asks, she was never here." The girl nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." On the drive home, Isabella talked in fragments, stopping every few minutes to catch her breath through what I was sure were cracked ribs. She told me she had been doing the bookkeeping for the Burwell Family Foundation, a charity that funded rural health clinics across the state. Judith ran it, had been running it for 12 years. On the surface, it looked like the kind of work that gets you photographed at galas and quoted in the Tulsa World. But beneath the surface, Isabella had found something ugly. Fake invoices, Mom. Hundreds of them. Companies that don't exist billing the foundation for services that were never provided. I traced 6 of them. They all lead back to accounts controlled by Judith. "How much?" I asked quietly. "At least $8 million over the last 5 years. Maybe more." I tightened my grip on the wheel. $8 million meant for sick people in poor communities, stolen by a woman who wore pearls to church every Sunday. I confronted her, Isabella continued. "I know I shouldn't have. But I thought, she's my mother-in-law. Maybe there's an explanation. Maybe I'm wrong." And she didn't even deny it. Just got very calm, very cold. She said if I told anyone, she would destroy me. Said no one would believe a Mexican girl over a Burwell. Then she offered to drive me to dinner, said we should talk it through like family. I felt my stomach drop because I already knew where this was going. She drove out past Catoosa, pulled off onto a back road. I asked where we were going and she just smiled. Then she stopped the car and told me to get out. I was confused. And then she hit me. She had a flashlight, one of those heavy metal ones. She hit me in the face, in the ribs. She was screaming about how I was filthy, how my blood was polluting her family line, how her grandchildren would never be tainted by someone like me. Isabella paused and put her hand on her stomach. And I understood. "You're pregnant." 11 weeks, she whispered. "She knows." I told her last week, thinking she'd be happy. She looked at me like I'd announced a disease. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine. We sat in the dark for a moment, listening to the crickets and the ticking of the cooling engine. My mind was already 3 steps ahead. We needed safety, evidence, and an ally powerful enough to match the Burwell name. "What about Colton?" I asked. "Does he know what happened?" Isabella closed her eyes. "Colton does whatever his mother tells him. He always has. If I go to him, he'll call her first. He'll believe her version." I nodded. I had suspected as much for years. Colton was a pleasant man, good-looking, good manners, but he had the backbone of a wet noodle. Judith had raised him to be dependent on her approval, and he had never outgrown it. Inside the house, I cleaned Isabella's wounds the way I'd learned in the first aid course I took after Ray died. Butterfly bandages on the cut above her eyebrow, ice packs for the swelling, ibuprofen for the pain, safe in the first trimester. I checked twice. I wrapped her ribs with an elastic bandage and helped her into my bed. Then I sat at the kitchen table and called my brother. Hector Medina is 58 years old, a retired Army Ranger who did 3 tours in Iraq and now runs a small private investigation firm in Oklahoma City. He is the toughest person I know and the most tender. He cried at his daughter's quinceañera and then went home and bench pressed 250 pounds. When I told him what happened, he was quiet for a long time. "Don't call anyone," he said. "Don't turn on Isabella's phone. If she has one, pull the battery. I'll be there before sunrise." He arrived at 4:30 in the morning with a duffel bag, a laptop, and a look on his face I hadn't seen since he came back from Fallujah. Calm but deadly, like a man who has already decided on a course of action and is simply working through the steps. He examined Isabella's injuries with the same clinical efficiency he'd used on wounded soldiers. 2 cracked ribs, probably. Concussion, mild. The wrist is sprained, not broken. She needs a doctor, but not a local one. "I know a nurse practitioner in Muskogee," I said. "Off the books. She owes me a favor." "Good. Call her." He turned to Isabella. "The phone Judith knows about, where is it?" "In my purse." He found it, removed the SIM card, and put it in a bag. "They might have tracking software on it. We assume they do until we know otherwise." He looked at me. "Your car. When's the last time the Burwells had access to it?" I thought back. Colton insisted on getting it serviced at their family mechanic 2 months ago, said it was a gift. Hector went outside with a flashlight. He came back 5 minutes later holding a small black device the size of a matchbox, GPS tracker, mounted under the rear bumper. Isabella's face went gray. "They've been watching you?" "Watching both of us, probably." I took the tracker from Hector and set it on the table. "What do we do with it?" "Leave it here for now. Let them think you're home." He opened his laptop. "Now tell me everything about the foundation. Every name, every number, every account Isabella found." For the next 3 hours, we went through everything. Isabella had photographed dozens of documents on her phone before confronting Judith. Bank statements, wire transfers, incorporation records for companies with generic names and no real offices. Hector's eyes narrowed as he studied the patterns. "This isn't amateur work," he said. "She's been doing this a long time, and she's got help. Someone inside the banking system is looking the other way." "Can your people trace it?" I asked. "Already on it. I called a friend at Treasury before I left OKC. Former ranger, now does financial crimes investigation. He'll dig quietly. By dawn, we had a plan. We couldn't go to local police because Judith sat on the county sheriff's advisory board. We couldn't go to the Tulsa DA because the Burwells had donated heavily to his campaign. We needed to go above them all, and we needed leverage that would make the family cooperate rather than fight. "There's one person who might help," Isabella said, sitting up despite the pain. "Warren Burwell, Colton's father." I raised an eyebrow. Everything I knew about Warren Burwell suggested he was cut from the same cloth as his wife. "He's not like her," Isabella continued. "He's cold, yes, and he cares more about the ranch than about people. But he's honest. Old school. He built that business on handshake deals and his word. If he finds out Judith has been stealing from a charity using his family name, he'll be furious." Hector leaned back in his chair. "And if he's furious at the right person, he becomes our shield instead of our enemy." "Exactly." Over the next 2 days, Hector worked his contacts. His friend at Treasury confirmed what Isabella had found and then some. The shell companies traced to a financial advisor named Prescott, who had been quietly managing Judith's theft for years. The total wasn't $8 million, it was closer to 14. And there was something else. Judith had been funneling a portion of the money into a private account under her maiden name, separate from anything the Burwell family controlled. "She's building an escape fund," Hector said, "getting ready to run if things go bad." "There's more," he added, pulling up a series of photographs on his laptop. "Prescott isn't just her financial advisor." The photos showed Judith and a well-dressed man in his 40s at a restaurant in Dallas, walking into a hotel, getting into the same car at a small regional airport. The body language was unmistakable. "She's having an affair," I said flatly. "For at least 2 years, based on what my guy found." Isabella stared at the photos. "She called my blood dirty," she said quietly. "She beat me for being Mexican. And all this time she's been stealing from sick people and sleeping with her accountant. That's why we're going to win," I told her, "because people like Judith Burwell think they're untouchable. They get so used to looking down on everyone else that they forget someone might be looking right back at them." On the 3rd morning, Hector drove to Tulsa to meet Warren Burwell. He had sent an encrypted email the night before with a carefully selected sample of the evidence, enough to prove the fraud was real, enough to show the affair was documented, and a polite request for a meeting. Warren had responded within the hour. I stayed with Isabella. She was healing slowly. The swelling around her eye had gone down enough that she could open it, and the color was shifting from purple to a sickly yellow. She spent most of the day on the couch, one hand always resting on her stomach. "Do you think the baby is okay?" she asked me, for the 10th time. The nurse practitioner said everything looked normal, no bleeding, no cramping, but we'll get a proper ultrasound as soon as it's safe. She was quiet for a moment. "Mom, I need to tell you something." I sat down beside her. 2 years ago, when I had the miscarriage. She swallowed hard. I found something in the kitchen after. A bottle of pills in Judith's bag that she left at our house. I looked them up online. They can cause contractions, miscarriage. I told myself I was being paranoid, that a woman wouldn't do that to her own grandchild. The room went very still. I felt the blood drain from my face. You think she caused your miscarriage? I know she did. Isabella's voice was steady now, hard as stone, and I think Colton knew. Because when I showed him the bottle, he took it from me and said I was imagining things. The next day the bottle was gone and he never mentioned it again. I closed my eyes. The depth of cruelty it takes to poison your own daughter-in-law, to kill your own grandchild, because the mother's blood isn't pure enough. My grandmother, Abuela Rosa, crossed the Rio Grande at 17 with nothing but the clothes on her back and a fierce determination to make a life. She worked fields, cleaned houses, saved every penny, and put 2 children through college. She died at 91 with more dignity in her little finger than Judith Burwell had in her entire existence. Hector returned that evening with news. The meeting had gone exactly as we hoped. Warren Burwell was a man of few words, but when Hector laid out the evidence, those few words were decisive. He turned white when he saw the financial records, Hector reported, then red when he saw the photos of Judith and Prescott. He sat there for a full minute without speaking. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" "And you told him?" "I told him we need 3 things. A safe divorce for Isabella with fair compensation. A guarantee that Judith never comes near Isabella or the baby. And his word that he'll handle the foundation mess quietly, return the money, and shut down the fraud." What did he say? He agreed to all 3. But he added something we didn't expect. Hector paused, and something softened in his face. He wants to meet Isabella, alone, if she's willing. He said he wants to apologize. Isabella and I looked at each other. I could see the conflict in her eyes, the fear of anything Burwell, and the curiosity about a man who might be different from his wife and son. "I'll meet him," she said. Warren came the following Saturday. He arrived in a dusty pickup truck, not the luxury SUV I expected. He wore jeans and a work shirt, and his hands were rough. He looked like what he was, a rancher who still got up before dawn to check on his cattle despite being worth tens of millions. When he saw Isabella's face, still bruised and swollen, he flinched. It was a small movement, barely noticeable, but I caught it. He sat across from her in my living room and spoke without preamble. "I failed you," he said. "I knew Judith was difficult. I knew she had her prejudices. But I told myself it was just talk, that she'd come around once she saw what kind of woman you are. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Isabella listened without expression. "Did you know about the foundation?" "No." His jaw tightened. "If I had, I would have stopped it years ago. That money was supposed to help people in real need. What she did is unforgivable." "And Colton?" Warren's face aged 10 years in a second. "My son is a disappointment to me. I raised him to be a man, and somehow he became a shadow of his mother instead. I don't say that with pride." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Divorce papers. Already drawn up. The terms are generous. The house in Broken Arrow, the one you liked on Cedar Street, is in your name now. There's a trust for the child. And Judith will be leaving the country by the end of the month." "Leaving?" I asked. I gave her a choice. Face criminal prosecution for fraud and assault, or take a one-way ticket to Portugal with enough money to live modestly, and the understanding that she never contacts this family again. She chose Portugal, Isabella guessed. She chose Portugal. Isabella looked at the envelope for a long time. Then she looked at Warren. "I found pills in her bag 2 years ago, after my miscarriage, pills that cause contractions." The color left Warren's face completely. He sat very still for what felt like an eternity. "She killed my first grandchild," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word. It was the only time I ever saw Warren Burwell lose his composure. He covered his eyes with one hand and breathed deeply for several seconds. "I'll handle it," he said when he could speak again. "I'll make sure there's documentation, in case she ever tries to come back or contact you. This will never happen again. I swear it on everything I have." After he left, Isabella sat holding the envelope. She hadn't opened it. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I don't know what I am," she said honestly. "Relieved? Angry? Sad? All of it at once. That sounds about right." She finally opened the envelope and read the documents. When she finished, she set them down and looked at me with clear eyes. "Mom, he put something else in here, a letter. He says he wants to be part of the baby's life." Not as a Burwell, but as a grandfather. He says he'll follow whatever rules I set. And what do you think about that? She rubbed her stomach thoughtfully. I think every child deserves people who love them. And I think Warren is not his wife. He's not his son, either. He's his own man, and for what it's worth, he showed up. I nodded. My grandmother used to say that you judge a tree by the fruit it bears, but sometimes a good branch grows from a rotten trunk. Maybe Warren was that branch. 4 months passed. Isabella healed. Her body mended first, then slowly, carefully, her spirit followed. She had nightmares for weeks, waking up, gasping, reaching for bruises that were no longer there. I held her on those nights the way I did when she was small and afraid of thunderstorms. The baby grew. Isabella's belly rounded beautifully, and she developed that particular glow that pregnant women get, a warmth that comes from the inside. She started working remotely as a forensic accountant, her experience with the Burwell Foundation having given her, in a grim irony, exactly the skills needed for the job. Hector bought a small house 10 minutes from mine. He said it was for the investment, but I knew it was to stay close, to keep watching over his niece the way he'd watched over his squad. We heard nothing from Judith. Warren confirmed she had left for Lisbon and had been warned that any attempt at contact would result in immediate criminal referral. Colton, predictably, drifted. He sent one text message asking Isabella if she was okay. She didn't respond. He didn't ask again. On a cold February morning, Isabella woke me at 3 a.m. Her water had broken. Hector drove us to the hospital in Muskogee, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his face a mask of controlled panic. For a man who had survived ambushes and IED attacks, the prospect of his niece giving birth reduced him to a nervous wreck. The labor lasted 9 hours. I held Isabella's hand through every contraction, wiped the sweat from her face, told her she was strong, that she was brave, that her grandmother and great-grandmother were with us in that room, lending their strength across the generations. And when the cry came, high and fierce and indignant at being pulled into this cold, bright world, I wept. A boy, the doctor announced. Healthy. 7 pounds, 6 ounces. They placed him on Isabella's chest, and she touched his face with trembling fingers. He had dark hair, dark eyes, and skin the color of warm honey. He was perfect. Raphael, she whispered. After Abuelo. In the waiting room, Hector paced until we came out. When I told him the name, he stopped pacing and sat down hard in a plastic chair and cried. Our grandfather, Dolores Medina, had been a bracero worker who came to Oklahoma in the 50s and stayed. He picked cotton and peaches and somehow saved enough to buy a small piece of land. He raised his family on it, taught his grandchildren to be proud of where they came from, and died peacefully at 87, respected by everyone who knew him. Warren came to the hospital the next day. He held Raphael awkwardly, the way men who aren't used to babies always do, like the child might shatter in his hands. But his eyes were soft, and when Raphael wrapped a tiny fist around his finger, Warren smiled in a way that transformed his entire face. Dolores Medina, he said, testing the name. Strong name. It means a lot to us, I told him. It should, he said. Names carry weight. They carry history. He visited regularly after that, always calling first, always respectful of boundaries. He brought practical gifts, a car seat, a stroller, a college savings bond, never anything ostentatious. And gradually, awkwardly, he became part of our family's orbit. One evening in April, when the dogwoods were blooming and Raphael was 2 months old, Isabella and I sat on the porch watching the sun go down. Hector had just left after dinner. Raphael slept in his carrier beside us, making the small sighing sounds that babies make when they're dreaming of whatever it is babies dream of. Mom, Isabella said, I've been thinking about something. Tell me. When Judith called me filthy. When she said my blood was dirty, that my baby would be tainted. I used to lie awake at night hearing those words. They echoed in my head like they were carved there. She paused, watching the last light fade from the sky. But now I look at Raphael and I see Abuelo's chin and Abuela Rosa's eyes and your stubbornness and Dad's smile. I see generations of people who crossed borders and broke barriers and built lives out of nothing. And I think, if that's what dirty blood produces, then I'll take it. I reached over and took her hand. Your abuela Rosa would say the same thing. I know. She smiled. I can hear her right now. She'd say, Mija, the people who talk about blood are the ones whose own blood has nothing to say. I laughed because that was exactly what my grandmother would have said, word for word. Raphael stirred in his carrier. His dark eyes opened, and he looked up at the darkening sky with the wide, wondering gaze of someone seeing everything for the first time. Isabella lifted him into her arms. You come from warriors, she told him softly. From people who crossed deserts and survived and built and loved. Don't you ever let anyone tell you different. I looked at my daughter, at my grandson, at the small brick house my husband built, at the land my grandfather worked, and I thought about how strange and terrible and beautiful life can be. A year ago, I was a quiet retiree who made tamales and taught English classes. Now, I was a woman who had stared down one of the most powerful families in Oklahoma and won, not with money, not with connections, but with the things my grandmother gave me: patience, courage, and the stubborn refusal to accept that anyone's blood is lesser than anyone else's. They called it dirty. We proved it was gold. If you like this story, hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel. This motivates us to create new and interesting stories every day. Don't miss the new video that you see right now on the main screen. All the best and be happy.